Doctors had given the boy 3 days. But Elvis Presley gave him something else, a miracle moment. And this moment would go down in history. The fluorescent lights of St. Jude Children's Hospital flickered in the Memphis night. August 1977. The air conditioning hummed through empty corridors. Most visitors had gone home hours ago. Security guard Marcus Johnson sat at his desk, half asleep, when he heard it. A knock. Not at the main entrance. At the back delivery door. The one nobody used after midnight. He walked slowly, flashlight in hand. Through the small window, he saw a figure. Tall. Wearing sunglasses at 2 a.m. A black leather jacket. And that unmistakable silhouette. Marcus's hand froze on the door handle. His heart stopped. Because standing there, alone, without bodyguards or cameras or screaming fans, was Elvis Presley. "I need to see a boy," Elvis said quietly. "His name is Thomas. Thomas Whitmore. Room 304. Marcus didn't ask questions. He opened the door. 3 floors above them, in room 304, a mother sat beside her son's bed. Linda Whitmore hadn't slept in 72 hours. Her hand rested on her boy's chest, feeling each shallow breath. Thomas was 8 years old. Leukemia had ravaged his small body for 2 years. The doctors had stopped treatments 3 days ago. There was nothing left to do but wait. On the nightstand sat a small photograph. Thomas and his father at an Elvis concert, 1975. His father had died in a car accident 6 months later. Thomas kept that photo next to his bed every single night. "When I get better, Mama," he would whisper, "I'm gonna meet Elvis. Just like Daddy and I did." But Thomas wasn't getting better. Nobody knew what was about to happen next. Nobody could have predicted that the king of rock and roll was about to break every rule he'd ever followed. Linda heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. She wiped her eyes and stood up, expecting a night nurse. The door opened. And her breath caught in her throat. Elvis Presley stood in the doorway. No entourage. No cameras. No fanfare. Just a man in a leather jacket, holding a guitar case, with tears already forming in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I heard about Thomas. I hope it's okay that I'm here." Linda couldn't speak. She covered her mouth with both hands. Elvis stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He walked to the bed and looked down at the sleeping boy. Thomas's breathing was labored. His skin was pale. But on his thin wrist, he wore a rubber bracelet. The kind they sold at concerts. It said, "Elvis forever." Elvis knelt beside the bed. He didn't care about his expensive jacket touching the hospital floor. He didn't care about anything except this moment. He reached out and gently touched Thomas's hand. "Hey there, little man," Elvis whispered. "It's me. It's Elvis." Thomas's eyes fluttered open. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then disbelief. His lips moved but no sound came out. Elvis smiled, that famous smile that had melted millions of hearts, but this time it was different. This time it was breaking. "I heard you've been a rail fighter," Elvis said. "Your mama told me about you. About how brave you've been." Thomas tried to sit up. Elvis gently helped him, adjusting the pillows behind his back. The boy's hand gripped Elvis's with surprising strength. "Are you real?" Thomas whispered. His voice was barely audible. "I'm real, son. I'm right here." Linda stood frozen in the corner, tears streaming down her face. Elvis glanced at her and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her pain. Then he turned back to Thomas. "You know what?" Elvis said. "I brought something for you." He opened the guitar case. Inside was his personal acoustic guitar. The one he'd used to write. "Can't Help Falling in Love." The one that never left his side. Elvis Presley, in the middle of the night, in a hospital room with a dying child, was about to do something that would define his entire legacy. "This guitar," Elvis said, running his hand over the wood, "has been with me through everything. Every stage. Every recording. Every moment that mattered. He lifted it carefully and placed it in Thomas's lap. The boy's eyes widened. I want you to have it, Elvis said. Linda gasped. Mr. Presley, we can't. Please, Elvis interrupted gently. It would be an honor. Thomas's fingers trembled as they touched the strings. But it's yours, he whispered. Now it's yours, Elvis said. And you know what else? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small harmonica. This was my daddy's. He gave it to me when I was about your age. He told me, son, music ain't just sound. It's medicine. It's magic. It heals things that doctors can't touch. He placed the harmonica in Thomas's other hand. Now you've got both. The guitar and the magic. Thomas looked at his mother. She was crying so hard she could barely stand. He looked back at Elvis. Will you play something? The boy asked. Elvis nodded. He took the guitar back gently and positioned himself on the edge of the bed. What do you want to hear? The one Daddy loved, Thomas said. Love me tender. Elvis's hands found the chords. He began to play. Softly. Intimately. Not like a performance. Like a lullaby. Like a prayer. His voice filled the small hospital room, rich and warm and impossibly tender. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. Thomas closed his eyes and leaned back against the pillows. A smile crossed his face. The first real smile Linda had seen in weeks. Elvis kept playing, kept singing, his own eyes closed now, pouring everything he had into this moment. But what happened next, what Elvis did after the song ended, nobody saw coming. Not even Thomas's mother. When the last note faded, Elvis set the guitar down carefully. He looked at Thomas, who was breathing easier now, more peacefully than he had in days. Thomas, Elvis said, I need to tell you something important. The boy opened his eyes. You know how everyone says I'm the king? Elvis asked. Thomas nodded weakly. Well, they're wrong. I'm not the king of anything. But you? He leaned closer. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You're the strongest fighter I've ever known. And if anyone deserves to be called royalty, it's you. Elvis reached up and took off the gold chain he was wearing. A small medallion hung from it. A cross. This belonged to my mother, he said. She wore it every day of her life. She told me it would protect me. Keep me safe. He placed it around Thomas's neck. Now it's going to protect you. Thomas touched the medallion with trembling fingers. Thank you, he whispered. Elvis stood up and walked to Linda. He took both her hands in his. You're raising a warrior, he told her. Don't you ever forget that. No matter what happens, he fought with more courage than most grown men ever will. Linda collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Elvis held her, this stranger, this mother, this woman whose world was ending. He held her like she was family. It's okay, he whispered. Let it out. It's okay. After several minutes, Linda pulled back. How did you know? She asked through her tears. How did you know to come? Elvis smiled sadly. A nurse named Sarah called my manager. She told him about Thomas. About the photograph. About what he'd been saying. He paused. I canceled the recording session to be here. And I'd cancel 1,000 more for moments like this. He turned back to Thomas, who was watching with half-closed eyes. Hey, buddy, Elvis said. I need you to do something for me. Anything, Thomas whispered. I need you to keep fighting. Just a little longer. Can you do that? Thomas nodded slowly. Good man. Elvis reached into his pocket one more time. He pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of Elvis on stage, mid-performance, sweat on his face, passion in his eyes. On the back, he'd written something. He handed it to Linda. She read it silently, tears falling on the paper. To Thomas, the strongest man I know. You taught me what real courage looks like. Keep this close. And remember, legends never die. They live on in the hearts of those who love them. You are my legend. Love, Elvis Presley. August 16th, 1977. Tomorrow would be August 16th, Elvis's birthday. And he'd spent the hours before it with a dying child. The moment that followed would be talked about for decades. The moment that proved Elvis Presley wasn't just an entertainer. He was something much more profound. Elvis leaned down and kissed Thomas's forehead. I gotta go now, little man. But I'll be thinking about you. Every single day. Will I see you again? Thomas asked. Elvis smiled, but his eyes were full of pain. Maybe not here. But someday, somewhere, we'll sing together again. I promise you that. He picked up his guitar case. At the door, he turned back one last time. Thomas had already fallen asleep, the harmonica clutched in one hand, the medallion resting on his chest. Linda stood beside the bed, holding the photograph like it was the most precious thing in the world. Thank you, she mouthed silently. Elvis nodded. Then he was gone. Marcus, the security guard, watched him leave through the back door, the same way he'd come. No press. No photos. No publicity. Just a man who'd given everything he could to a child who needed a miracle. Share this story if you believe in the power of compassion. Subscribe to hear more moments that changed lives forever. The next morning, Linda woke up in the hospital chair. Thomas was still sleeping. But something was different. His breathing was stronger. His color was slightly better. The doctors couldn't explain it. They called it a mysterious improvement. Thomas lived for 3 more weeks. Not 3 days. 3 weeks. And every single day, he held that harmonica. He looked at that photograph. He touched that medallion. He told every nurse, every doctor, every visitor. Elvis came to see me. Elvis gave me his guitar. Elvis said I was brave. Some people didn't believe him. They thought it was a fever dream. Medication-induced hallucination. But Linda knew better. She had the photograph. She had the guitar. She had the harmonica. And she had the memory of watching the king of rock and roll kneel beside her son's bed and give him a reason to keep fighting. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley turned 42. He spent his birthday quietly, away from cameras. He called Linda Whitmore to check on Thomas. How's our champion doing? He asked. He's still here, Linda said, crying. He's still fighting. Good, Elvis said. That's my boy. But the story doesn't end there. Because what Elvis started in that hospital room rippled outward in ways nobody could have imagined. 2 weeks later, on the morning of August 31st, Thomas Whitmore passed away peacefully. He was holding the harmonica. Wearing the medallion. The guitar sat beside his bed. Linda was there, holding his other hand, singing, "Love Me Tender," through her tears. The day after Thomas died, newspapers across Memphis reported that Elvis Presley had made an anonymous donation of $50,000 to St. Jude Children's Hospital. The hospital used it to create the Thomas Whitmore Memorial Music Room, where sick children could play instruments, listen to records, and find healing through music. Linda kept the guitar. She couldn't sell it. Couldn't give it away. It sat in Thomas's room, exactly where he'd left it, for 30 years. In 2007, on what would have been Thomas's 38th birthday, Linda finally decided to share the story publicly. She went on television. She showed the photograph. The harmonica. The medallion. The guitar. People think Elvis was just an entertainer, she said, her voice steady now, strengthened by decades of grief and grace. But he was so much more than that. He was human. He was kind. He cared about people nobody else cared about. He gave my son 3 extra weeks of life. 3 weeks of hope. 3 weeks of believing in miracles. The interview went viral. Millions watched. Millions cried. And millions of people who never understood Elvis's legacy suddenly got it. He wasn't famous because of his music. He was legendary because of his heart. Subscribe now to discover more stories that prove compassion changes everything. Like this video if you believe kindness is the most powerful force in the world. The guitar now sits in the Elvis Presley Museum in Memphis. But it's not in the main exhibit. It's in a special room dedicated to the King's heart. Next to it is Thomas's photograph, the harmonica, the medallion, and a placard that reads, "On August 15, 1977, Elvis Presley visited St. Jude Children's Hospital in secret. He asked for no publicity, no recognition, no reward. He simply wanted to bring joy to a dying child." This guitar, given away on that night, represents the true measure of Elvis's legacy, not fame, but love. Not performance, but presence. Not the king of rock and roll, but the king of compassion. Marcus Johnson, the security guard, never told anyone about that night until 2010, when he was interviewed for a documentary. "I've worked security for 30 years," he said. "I've seen presidents, celebrities, billionaires. But that night? That was different. That was the night I saw what a real king looks like." Today, every August 15th, the lights in St. Jude's music room dim at midnight. Staff members gather. They play "Love Me Tender" on the speakers. They remember Thomas. They remember Elvis. They remember that true greatness isn't measured in albums sold or stages conquered. It's measured in moments like this. Quiet. Unseen. Eternal. Because legends don't die when their hearts stop beating. They live forever in the lives they touched. And on that night in 1977, Elvis Presley didn't just touch one life. He changed the meaning of compassion itself.